Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Text Messages Resurrected. I'm the parasite of the show, Rick Tex. We're glad to have you joining us once again. Tuesday evening, February 25th, 2019, broadcasting out of Elk River, Minnesota. So lately, we've been experimenting with some different video software editing equipment. We were going to initially do K10 live, but unfortunately, right now we're recording video and microphone to OBS Studio, and then from there putting into the editing software, and then in the editing software cutting out bits and pieces, adding sounds, adding backgrounds, chroma keys, all that. So basically we had some issues with K10 Live because they did not accept the FLV files from OBS Studio for some reason or another. Oh yeah, it could be I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but for some reason it just didn't seem to work. So we went ahead and we went with OpenShot. And that so far seems to be doing the trick. I mean, yeah, there's some problems with the green screen. So I went ahead and we added parts in this room for better sound deadening. And now we've since removed those parts. So the microphone seems like it's pretty good. It only picks up certain sounds. But there may be some degree of echoing. We're going to have to listen for that. And if we do have that problem, then we'll have to set up the blankets again and hope for a new way to eradicate the screen ailment. See, seems like to improve one thing, it's always at the slight expense of another. But ultimately, we try to optimize everything. So that's why it's good to just do little bits and pieces here and there. That way, when you actually hit on something that works on all cylinders, then you know that it's something that you can move forward with and make a great show. Yeah, we probably will try some other video software in the future. See, it is a little disheartening because VSDC seemed like it was a pretty good system. But the only problem was that little sound issue. You know, they'd have these really high intense blips. Like, usually in the introduction. So if I would, I'd replay the video in the software and there's no sound blip. Then I'd export it. Then there's a sound blip. And it would happen intermittently. So I figured, all right, well, I mean, it does seem rather like a professional system that they got set up, and you can upgrade the Pro, and I don't know what you pay a certain amount of money, but see, it's like a say you meet the perfect animal or whatever the case may be, and the animal has HIV, so it's only going to be around for a couple months or something. It's just everything was good except that one huge caveat, and maybe they'll fix that in later updates. But needless to say, it is slightly demoralizing. But ultimately, we will make it to some type of finish line. So getting back to the content of today, and it does make it more. One of the reasons why we've been doing a lot of on-air production meetings lately is because it does make it slightly more difficult to focus on the content of the show when we always had a content on, fixing hardware or working on software or doing things of that nature. Initially, when we started off on this voyage, it was just turn on a camera, record whatever, stick it on the most simple, complex, simple rudimentary video editing software out there and call it good. And having a Windows Movie Maker, which has been obsolete for about 7 years, but seemed to work for what we wanted to do back then. And now, when we want to get a little bit more fancier with the sound and the video quality, you're going to go through these trials and tribulations, but it is what it is. So, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, what we wanted to talk about today were the lungs. We got two lungs here. The right lung is actually a little bit bigger than the left lung, which seems a little odd because the body should be symmetrical. But I mean, the heart is slightly skewed to one side of the body, so perhaps the size of the lung is sort of offsetting that balance there. And you got your liver and the parts of the intestines, they're all not entirely symmetric. So your body needs to be in balance. Otherwise, you'd be walking around crooked and probably mess up your spine and your nerves and all that good stuff. So lungs are air-filled organs located on both sides of the chest, which the medical term for that is the thorax. So there's about 2,400 kilometers of airwave, and there's 300 to 500 million alveoli. The alveoli, if you look at a picture of a lung, which should be one back here, you'll see there's a lot of veins and capillaries, and there's a lot more than just air inside of there. So on the end of those veins and capillaries and everything, are the alveoles, or the vessels, I guess, technical term. Bronchioles is the technical term. There's a lot of alveoles on there which absorb and diffuse. They diffuse the carbon dioxide into your lungs, and then you breathe it out. They absorb the oxygen from your blood supply, or the oxygen that you breathe in, they put it into your blood supply, put it back to your heart, then your heart sends it to body tissues, and then back to the airways of the lungs. That's basically how that works. Now, the trachea, which is also known as the windpipe, it inhales the air into the lungs through the tubular bronchioles that have the alveoles on the end that absorb the oxygen and diffuse the carbon dioxide. So they're tubular branches, and they divide into microscopic subsections. So if you were to calculate them all up, they'd be about 50 to 75 meters squared of surface area. That's about half a tennis court. It's pretty substantial when you consider the size of the lungs can fit inside a human chest, which isn't all that big. And both lungs together weigh about 1.3 kilograms, so almost 3 pounds, but not quite. So at the end of the bronchi are, they're air sacs. That's what the alveoles are. They're just clusters of air sacs, and they keep branching off into little smaller and smaller particles. So some of the ailments that you can have with your lungs are chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, which is difficulty exhaling air. It usually a result of smoking. And, we should probably talk about smoking a little bit. So back in like the 30s and 40s, smoking was advertised as being healthy and everything. And RJ Reynolds, Lori Lard, whatever other company out there, they would go to all these physicians and doctors and tell them they should smoke cigarettes and should be on advertisements and give the illusion that it's healthy. They knew darn well that it was causing cancer to people, and lung cancer and laryngeal cancer. But they didn't really care. Their whole objective was to sell cigarettes, and they knew that if they could create the public image that it was healthy, that more people would buy it. So in the 30s, 40s, and especially around the Great Depression, what happened then is a lot of these cigarette manufacturers would pay off physicians and medical institutions that were concerned about failing due to lack of funding during the Great Depression. So they'd pay them off, maybe create a few fallacious studies and create some promos and advertisements for cigarettes. And then everyone would think it was healthy. So you had about 50 to 60% of the male population that was smoking, and about 30 to 40% of the female population that was smoking back then. Nowadays, those numbers have dropped off a cliff significantly. It's probably less than 5%, just the whole entire population in the United States. And it's pretty much banned from all public buildings now too, thankfully. Otherwise, you'd go to a bar or nightclub, and then you come home just smelling and reeking like cigarette smoke, which was very horrible. And smoking at one time was even advertised as curing throat irritation. And women could become slim because it would apparently speed up your metabolism. So, and even today, a few individuals pointed out to me that they smoke because they would turn into lard asses if they didn't. So that was one of the reasons why they wanted to do that. But around the 1950s, the connection between lung cancer and laryngeal cancer as a result of smoking was made in Times and Reader's Digest. And then the Surgeon General, U.S. Surgeon General, even pointed out that it was causing those types of cancers in the early 1950s. So that's when the decline of smoking officially began. I mean, people still knew. See, smoking, it was still cool, like from the 60s through the 90s, but then in the 2000, 2010, then it just stopped being cool, and pretty much nobody does it anymore, thankfully. So that works out pretty good. It's a good way to make a society great again. So getting back to I'm digressing a little bit here, but getting back to the topic at hand. So emphysema is fragile walls of the alveoli are damaged, so they can no longer absorb or diffuse the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Bronchitis, inflammation of the bronchial branches, pneumonia, infection of lungs, asthma. Inflammation causing shortness of breath and wheezing, sort of like what happens on the show occasionally. But yeah, it's not a result of asthma. It's just wanting to make sure you, the ladies and gentlemen at home, are informed and entertained, hopefully. And lastly, obesity, which is additional weight makes lung expansion difficult. So the diaphragm is the main muscle of respiration. It allows your lungs to expand and contract. Your right lung has more lobes and segments than the left lung. So the lungs have two passages of blood. There's a pulmonary, which brings the deoxygenated blood to the lungs and back to the heart. And then there's the bronchial passage, which supplies the oxygenated blood from the heart to the airways of the lungs. And there's two modes of communication that it uses with the nervous system. It's supplied by the parasympathetic. The parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and relax. So when you're sleeping, you're at home and you're just watching TV, you're going on Facebook Live and BSing with people on Facebook, you're in a parasympathetic state. Now what happens to the lungs in a parasympathetic state is it causes the constriction of the bronchioles and the muscle, the bronchial muscles that control that, the surface area of them. So that just allows, it doesn't, you don't need as much air intake, and your body can focus more on building or repairing muscles and cells and everything like that too. So that's why you want to be in a parasympathetic state at least a good chunk of the day. And then the sympathetic state, which is the fight or flight syndrome, where you tense up and you start to get adrenaline and norepinephrine and all that stuff. It creates the bronchodilation, which is less resistance on your airways. So you're breathing in more out, you're taking in more oxygen, you're diffusing more carbon dioxide. So it allows you to do high intense activities, or you get in a brawl or go fisticuffs or start throwing hands with other people, you're in a sympathetic nervous system state. So that's basically the lungs in a nutshell. I mean, they're very, pretty much like every other organ of the body, they're very important, they're very critical. You don't want to live life without a lung or losing part of your lungs. So probably the most damaging things that you can do to your lungs are exposing it to dangerous air pollutants. Smoking is one of them. Inadvertently having food go down to your trachea, that's certainly something you want to avoid as well. And it is a good idea to look into how to do proper CPR and the Heimlich maneuver to both young children and adults. So if you're ever in a situation where you can potentially rescue somebody from choking, you're skilled and knowledgeable in that field. I mean, it's basically just pushing up on the diaphragm here on an adult, and on a children, it's hitting them in the back, because their diaphragm isn't strong enough for people to just grab them and shove up on it like a heart would do. But yeah, I mean, you can research that a little bit. Obviously, I'm not a medical professional, so. But hey, a little bit of knowledge is better than no knowledge. Now that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna have to put a conclusion on this show, and we certainly appreciate you bearing with us in these trying times of video editing software and creating better lighting and sound quality and all that. So thank you very much for joining us. Without you, we are absolutely nothing.